Welcome to Lit and Unfiltered by My Element, the podcast where real talk meets cannabis culture. Whether you're lighting up for wellness, relaxation, or curiosity, this is the space for raw, unfiltered conversations that go beyond the buzz. In every episode, we'll spark discussions that keep it real, give you the facts and push boundaries. No fluff, no filler. Just real talk about the cannabis revolution happening right now. So roll with us, kick back, and let's dive into another lit conversation. Proudly brought to you by My Element Electric Lighters. Make your own flame. Now to your hosts, Jax and Mia.
Hey there, and welcome to your deep dive. We've got a stack of articles about cannabis and pop culture. And let's be real, who has time to read through all that? We're here to give you the need to know, the interesting bits, the stuff that really makes you go, huh, I never thought of it that way.
It's a fascinating evolution, really. We're talking about a plant that's gone from being completely taboo to being plastered on billboards and sold in like high-end boutiques.
Yeah.
And this journey through pop culture, it mirrors a larger shift in societal attitudes.
Okay, so let's set the stage with music. It feels like cannabis has been a part of the music scene forever. I mean, you can't talk about reggae without thinking of Bob Marley, right?
And it wasn't just about the music with Marley. These articles highlight how reggae artists used cannabis as a form of spiritual expression.
Right.
And even as a symbol of resistance against oppression, particularly in Jamaica.
Right. It was about identity as much as it was about getting high. But then we see a shift in the way cannabis is portrayed in hip-hop, with artists like Snoop Dogg and Wiz Khalifa really bringing it into the mainstream.
And what's interesting here is that hip-hop provided a platform to challenge the criminal stereotype associated with cannabis.
Yeah.
Especially for Black communities.
Right.
This wasn't just about getting high. It was about reclaiming a narrative.
Yeah.
They weren't shying away from it. They were owning it.
So it became a form of empowerment, almost pushing back against these pre-existing narratives.
Absolutely.
And now we have entire music genres dedicated to it. Stoner rock, psychedelic rock. It's like cannabis went from a whisper to a full-blown anthem in the music world.
And with those anthems came a powerful platform for change. Many artists began using their music to advocate for legalization, building entire brands and businesses around cannabis. They turned their art into activism, shaping the conversation around this plant in a way that has never been done before.
That's wild. So music wasn't just reflecting the culture, it was actively changing it. Okay, so music lays down this foundation. But how does Hollywood pick up that beat and run with it? From what I've seen in these articles, it's a pretty wild ride.
Well, Hollywood definitely took that cannabis beat and ran with it all the way to the bank sometimes.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always a smooth ride.
Right.
Remember those old Reefer Madness movies?
Oh, yeah. Talk about fear-mongering.
Yeah.
Those movies painted a pretty terrifying picture of cannabis. Did they actually have that much influence on how people viewed it?
They absolutely did.
Yeah.
Those early films were practically propaganda,
Wow.
portraying cannabis as something that would turn you into a crazed criminal,
Right.
which played a huge role in creating the stigma around cannabis that lasted for decades. They really shaped public perception and even influenced policy.
Wow. That's kind of scary to think about how a movie could have that kind of power. So how do we go from Reefer Madness to Cheech and Chong? What changed the narrative?
Humor, my friend. Stoner comedies really flipped the script. They started popping up in the 90s and 2000s, offering a completely different perspective. Instead of fear, they brought in laughter.
Right. Like Half-Baked and Pineapple Express, those movies made cannabis seem relatable, even kind of cool in a comedic way.
Exactly. They weren't saying cannabis was harmless.
Yeah, right.
But they were definitely making people laugh at the absurdity of it all.
Yeah.
And by doing that, they chipped away at that wall of fear and judgment that those earlier films had built up.
It's amazing how humor can do that. And then TV shows started getting in on the act, right? I mean, that 70s show was full of subtle hints, but shows like Broad City and Workaholics really brought cannabis use front and center.
Right. Television's impact is huge because it brings those images into our living rooms.
Yeah.
Making it a part of everyday life. Shows like Disjointed and High Maintenance even center on cannabis businesses, further normalizing it for a whole new generation. It went from being this taboo topic to something people openly discussed and joked about.
It's like cannabis became a regular character on these shows.
Exactly. And with streaming platforms like Netflix and Hulu, we're seeing even more diversity in how cannabis is portrayed. Documentaries like The Legend of 420 and Grass is Greener explore both the medicinal and recreational aspects of cannabis, providing a platform for education and advocacy.
Okay, so we've gone from demonization to destigmatization, at least to some extent. But there's another layer to this whole pop culture evolution.
Yeah.
Cannabis as a brand. These articles talk about Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart joining forces, which seems random. How does that even happen?
Right. It's brilliant marketing, actually. Snoop Dogg, the ultimate cannabis icon, teaming up with Martha Stewart, the queen of domesticity. It's the perfect way to bridge the gap between counterculture and mainstream appeal.
It's like they looked at the stereotypical image of a stoner and said, hold my beer. It makes cannabis more approachable, less intimidating.
It's about breaking down those stereotypes and saying that cannabis can be enjoyed by anyone,
Right.
regardless of their background or lifestyle.
And it's not just celebrity pairings. Our sources mention athletes like Mike Tyson and Megan Rapinoe openly embracing cannabis.
Right, this is huge. Professional sports, especially in the U.S., have had this incredibly strict stance against cannabis.
Yeah.
So to see these major athletes, these icons, openly challenging those norms is a really big deal.
It's like they're reclaiming their own narratives, too.
Absolutely. And then there's the fashion world. We're seeing cannabis-themed clothing and accessories everywhere, from streetwear to high-end fashion. It's a statement.
So cannabis is the new black. I'm here for it. It's like it went from being something you hid to something you wear proudly.
Yes. It's a cultural identifier, a way to express your values and be part of a community.
Right.
And with the emergence of luxury cannabis brands like Bebo and Lord Jones,
Yeah.
it's even become a status symbol.
Okay, so we've covered music, movies, TV, fashion. But what about the digital age? Social media has to play a huge role in this whole cannabis revolution, right? It feels like everything explodes on social media these days. And with cannabis facing advertising restrictions, it seems like a no-brainer for getting the word out.
Yeah, it's been huge.
Yeah.
The articles we have here really emphasize how platforms like Instagram and TikTok have become vital for cannabis advocates and brands.
Right.
It gives them a direct line to their audience, something they couldn't dream of before.
It's like having your own cannabis network, right? But what about censorship? I know a lot of platforms are still figuring out how to handle cannabis content.
Yeah, it's a constant tightrope walk.
Right.
Even with growing acceptance, cannabis is still navigating legal gray areas and evolving social norms.
Yeah.
So influencers and brands have to be creative.
Right.
They're using coded language, focusing on lifestyle aspects, and pushing boundaries where they can. It's actually pretty fascinating to see how they're doing it.
It's like they're pioneers in this new digital frontier. Speaking of frontiers, these articles also touch on the intersection of cannabis and art. It feels like that's a connection that goes way back.
Oh, absolutely. For centuries, cannabis has been intertwined with creativity.
Right.
We see it in ancient rituals and classical literature, in modern art movements. What these articles do really well is showcase how cannabis can influence the creative process itself.
Yeah.
It's not just about painting a picture of cannabis. It's about how cannabis might change the way you paint.
Okay, so it's not just about putting a cannabis leaf on everything. So what are some examples of cannabis influencing art in a meaningful way?
Well, think about the psychedelic art movement of the 60s.
Okay.
Artists like Alex Grey and Rick Griffin were using cannabis to explore altered states of consciousness, and their art reflects those experiences.
Right.
Today, we're seeing a resurgence of interest in psychedelic art, along with a whole new wave of contemporary artists incorporating cannabis themes into their work.
Right. And then you have events like the Hash Marijuana and Hemp Museum and 420 Fest, which are more than just events. They're like celebrations of cannabis culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These become cultural hubs where people can connect, learn, and celebrate the plant in all its forms.
Yeah.
It's another way that cannabis is entering the mainstream conversation, moving beyond the shadows and into the spotlight.
It's pretty incredible when you think about it. We've gone from reefer madness to cannabis museums, from hiding it in the shadows to celebrating it in the streets and on our screens.
Right.
What a wild ride.
And this deep dive has only scratched the surface. As cannabis continues to infiltrate every corner of pop culture, it begs the question, what's next? Will we see cannabis-themed video games, cannabis-inspired operas? The possibilities are kind of mind-blowing.
That's the thing about pop culture, right? It's always evolving, always pushing boundaries. And with cannabis becoming more accepted and integrated into our lives, it's going to be fascinating to see what new trends and conversations emerge from this hazy, wonderful world.
Absolutely. So next time you scroll through your feed, catch a movie, or listen to the latest chart topper, Think about the subtle and not-so-subtle ways cannabis might be shaping the narrative. You might be surprised by what you discover.
That's the perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into cannabis and pop culture. Until next time, keep those questions coming and stay curious.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Lit and Unfiltered by My Element. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation and picked up some fresh insights on cannabis culture. Also, don't forget to check out myelement.store for our full range of electric lighters and accessories, designed with style, sustainability, and free lifetime replacement in mind. Still here? Cool. Here's an exclusive heads up just for our listeners. We've got a flash sale coming soon with over 50% off select lighters as well as some wild giveaways. You won't want to miss it. Head over to myelement.store. Join the crew and keep an eye on your inbox for the details. Until next time, keep it lit. My Element. Make your own flame.